Hello there, and welcome to Restful Realities. Tonight, we're embarking on a journey through one of Europe's most fascinating countries. A nation where history whispers from every cobblestone street, where the absurd dances with the sublime, and where laws from centuries past still linger in the modern world like ghosts, refusing to leave their favorite haunts. We're talking about France, of course. That hexagonal marvel floating at the edge of Western Europe. A country that has given the world revolutions and croissants, the Eiffel Tower and the guillotine, impressionist masterpieces and the metric system. But tonight, we're not interested in the France of tourist brochures and travel guides. No, we're diving deeper into the peculiar corners and strange shadows of French culture, history, and law. We're exploring 100 weird, wonderful, and downright bizarre facts about this nation. It has shaped so much of our modern world. So settle in, let your breathing slow, and join me as we wander through the curious landscape of French oddities. Let's begin our journey in the year 1830, in the midst of political upheaval. Picture, if you will, the Palace of Versailles in July of that year. The air hangs heavy with uncertainty as King Charles X, facing mounting pressure from revolutionary forces, makes the difficult decision to abdicate his throne. The crown passes to his son, Louis Antoine, who would become known to history as Louis XIX of France. Though historians debate whether he truly reigned at all, here's where our story takes its peculiar turn. According to some accounts, Louis Antoine's technical claim to the throne lasted exactly 20 minutes. 20 minutes. In that brief span, shorter than it takes to watch a television sitcom, he would have ascended to one of Europe's most prestigious thrones and then promptly abdicated in favor of his nephew, the Duke of Bordeaux. Guinness World Records recognizes this as the joint shortest reign in history, a title he shares with Crown Prince Luís Felipe of Portugal, who technically became king after his father's assassination, but died from his own wounds just 20 minutes later. Yet the historical evidence for this 20-minute reign is disputed. What we know for certain is that both Charles X's abdication and Louis Antoine's renunciation appeared on the same document, signed on August 2, 1830. Whether Louis Antoine ever truly became king in any meaningful sense, or whether this was merely a legal technicality, remains a matter of scholarly debate. The document itself refers to him only as Louis Antoine, not as king. Many legitimists, those who supported the Bourbon monarchy, never recognized the abdications as valid at all, considering Charles X as king until his death in 1830-6. Imagine the absurdity suggested by the legend. In the time it takes to have a leisurely cup of coffee, Louis Antoine might have gone from prince to king to former king. He never had time to issue a decree, to sit for a royal portrait, or to feel the weight of the crown upon his head for more than the briefest moment, if at all. The servants at Versailles barely had time to consider changing the royal monograms on the palace correspondence. It's the sort of historical footnote that seems almost too strange to be true, hovering in that uncertain space between fact and myth, a testament to the chaos and uncertainty of that revolutionary period. But if you think 20 minutes is a strange amount of time to perhaps be king, consider this. In France, you can marry someone who's already dead. This isn't the plot of a Gothic romance novel or some macabre joke. It's actual French law, codified in Article 171 of the Civil Code, and it happens more often than you might think. The law allowing posthumous marriages emerged from tragedy. In 1959, the Malpasset Dam burst near Fréjus in southern France, and the resulting flood killed over 400 people. Among the victims was a young man named André Capra, who had been engaged to be married. His fiancée, Irene Jodart, already pregnant with his child, was devastated not just by her loss, but by the fact that she would never become his wife. She appealed directly to President Charles de Gaulle, and the story captured the public imagination. Within months, de Gaulle had authorized the marriage, and the law was formally established to be granted permission for a posthumous marriage. You need to prove that the deceased genuinely intended to marry you before their death. You need the approval of the President of France himself, and you need the consent of the deceased's family. And here's the crucial detail. You don't inherit anything from your dead spouse. This isn't some loophole for gold diggers. It's purely symbolic, a way of honoring a commitment death interrupted, of giving legal recognition to a bond that was meant to be formalized, but never had the chance. The ceremony itself is haunting in its simplicity. A photograph of the deceased stands where they would have stood. The bride or groom speaks their vows into the silence. And when the officiant asks if the deceased takes their partner to be their lawfully wedded spouse, they answer on behalf of the absent party, "I do." It's one of the most melancholy ceremonies imaginable. And yet, it brings comfort to those who needed just one more chance to say their vows, to complete something that was left unfinished by fate's cruel intervention. The marriage is dated to the day before the death, making the survivor not so much newly married as newly widowed. Now, let's shift from the deeply personal to the vastly geographic. Here's a question that sounds like it should have an obvious answer. Which country has the most time zones in the world? Russia, perhaps, with its enormous landmass stretching from Eastern Europe all the way to the Pacific Ocean? Or maybe the United States, with its territories scattered across the globe? The answer is France. Yes, that relatively compact hexagon in Western Europe controls territory across 12 different time zones, or 13 if you count its claim in Antarctica. This is more than any other nation on Earth. Russia and the United States each have 11 time zones. The United Kingdom, with all its remaining overseas territories, has about 9. But France, through the accidents of colonial history and the remnants of its once vast empire, has territory in more time zones than anyone else. How is this possible? The answer lies in France's overseas departments and territories, scattered like jewels across 3 oceans. In the Caribbean, you'll find Martinique and Guadeloupe, operating on Atlantic Standard Time, 4 hours behind Paris. In South America, there's French Guiana, sharing a land border with Brazil and operating 3 hours behind the mother country. Cross the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean, and you'll encounter Réunion and Mayotte, 4 hours ahead of Paris. Keep going west, and you'll reach French Polynesia in the Pacific, operating a full 10 hours behind Paris, making it one of the last places on Earth to see each new day dawn. Then there's New Caledonia, sitting 11 hours ahead of Paris, and Wallis and Futuna, 12 hours ahead, so far around the globe that they're nearly back where they started. Add in St. Pierre and Miquelon, those tiny islands off the coast of Newfoundland that are all that remain of France's once mighty North American empire. And you have a nation that, despite its relatively modest size in Europe, maintains a presence across the entire planet. This creates fascinating situations. When Parisians are eating their lunch on a Tuesday afternoon, residents of French Polynesia are still sleeping through Monday night. When someone in Wallis and Futuna is greeting Wednesday morning, it's still Tuesday afternoon in mainland France. The French Foreign Ministry, when coordinating with its territories, must keep 12 different clocks running, a daily reminder that France is not just a European nation, but a truly global one. Speaking of France's European heartland, let's talk about its shape. France is often called l'Hexagone by its own citizens, and for good reason. If you look at a map of France, you'll notice that its borders form a rough 6-sided figure. It's not a perfect hexagon by any means, with the Mediterranean coast creating one irregular side and the Atlantic another, but the general shape is unmistakable. This hexagonal form has become so iconic that French school children learn to draw their country by first sketching a hexagon, then adding the details. The hexagon encompasses approximately 213,000 square miles, making France the largest country in the European Union by land area and the third largest in all of Europe, after Ukraine and the European portion of Russia. Within this hexagonal boundary, France manages to pack a remarkable diversity of landscapes: the snow-capped peaks of the Alps and Pyrenees, the sun-baked lavender fields of Provence, the misty forests of Brittany, the rolling vineyards of Burgundy and Champagne, the flat agricultural plains of the north, and the dramatic coastlines that border three different bodies of water: the Atlantic Ocean, the Mediterranean Sea, and the English Channel. But here's where it gets even more interesting. This hexagonal France, as neatly bounded as it might appear on a map, shares land borders with 8 different countries. Count them: Spain and Andorra to the south, crossing the Pyrenees; Italy and Switzerland to the east, beyond the Alps; Germany, Luxembourg, and Belgium to the northeast; and finally, Monaco, a tiny principality nestled into the southeastern coast. 8 neighbors for one hexagon, each border representing centuries of warfare, treaty-making, dynastic marriages, and the gradual crystallization of what we now think of as France. And remember that land border with Brazil we mentioned earlier? That's through French Guiana, making France and Brazil neighbors in South America. A geographical fact that surprises almost everyone who hears it for the first time. Let's return to the subject of French royalty, because no discussion of France would be complete without addressing the complex, often bloody relationship between this nation and its kings. For centuries, France was synonymous with absolute monarchy. The French kings didn't just rule, they embodied the nation itself. Louis XIV, the Sun King, is famous for supposedly declaring, "L'État, c'est moi, I am the state." Whether he actually said this is debatable among historians, but it perfectly captures the philosophy of French absolutism. Louis XIV reigned for 72 years, from 1643 to 1715, the longest verified reign of any sovereign monarch in European history. He transformed a hunting lodge into the magnificent Palace of Versailles, a building so opulent and grand that it became the envy of every other monarch in Europe. Versailles wasn't just a palace. It was a statement, a physical manifestation of royal power, with its hall of mirrors, its elaborate gardens designed by André Lentré, and its endless rooms and corridors where the entire French court lived out their lives in full view of the king. But all that grandeur, all that power, all that wealth extracted from the French people through centuries of taxation and feudal obligation, it all came crashing down in 1789. The French Revolution didn't just overthrow a government. It shattered an entire worldview. For the first time in history, a major European nation declared that sovereignty resided not in the person of the king, but in the people themselves. The revolutionaries stormed the Bastille on July 14th, a date that is still celebrated as France's national holiday. And they unleashed forces that would reshape not just France, but the entire world. The revolution gave us the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, one of the founding documents of human rights. It gave us the motto that still defines France today: Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité. Liberty, equality, fraternity. These weren't just empty words. They represented a fundamental reimagining of what a society could be. But the revolution also gave us the Reign of Terror, during which the guillotine worked overtime in Paris's public squares. And somewhere between 16,000 and 22,000 people lost their heads to that falling blade. King Louis XVI himself went to the guillotine in January of 1793, and his wife, Marie Antoinette, followed him in October of the same year. The Austrian-born queen has gone down in history with the phrase, "Let them eat cake," attributed to her, supposedly said in response to being told that the peasants had no bread. But historians now believe she never actually said this. It was revolutionary propaganda, designed to paint her as callously out of touch with the suffering of ordinary French people. The truth is more complex and more human than the caricature, but history often prefers its villains simple and its heroes pure. And speaking of the guillotine, here's a fact that stops most people in their tracks. France continued to use the guillotine for executions until 1977. Think about that for a moment. In 1977, Star Wars was released in theaters. Jimmy Carter was inaugurated as President of the United States. The first personal computer, the Apple II, went on sale. And in France, the guillotine, that icon of revolutionary justice from the 1700s, was still being used to execute criminals. The last person guillotined in France was Hamida Gendoubi on September 10, 1977. His execution took place in Marseille, behind the walls of Baumet's prison, away from public view. France didn't abolish capital punishment entirely until 1981, when President François Mitterrand and Justice Minister Robert Badinter finally ended a practice that had continued, in various forms, for centuries. The guillotine itself was designed to be humane. Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotin, for whom the device is named, didn't actually invent it, but he proposed its use to the National Assembly as a more egalitarian and supposedly less painful method of execution than the various gruesome techniques used under the old regime, where your method of execution depended on your social class. Nobles were beheaded by sword, which could be quick if the executioner was skilled, but agonizing if he wasn't. Commoners faced hanging or breaking on the wheel or burning at the stake. The guillotine, Guillotin argued, would kill everyone equally and instantly, regardless of their station in life. It was a strange kind of egalitarianism, but it fit the revolutionary spirit of the age. The blade fell with such regularity during the Terror that contemporary accounts describe how the blood ran in the gutters of the Yaw, Place de la Révolution, now known as the Place de la Concorde. The square where the guillotine stood during the Revolution is now one of Paris's most elegant public spaces, a place where tourists take photographs and Parisians cross on their daily commutes, mostly unaware that they're walking over ground soaked in the blood of thousands. France didn't just have one revolution. It's had several. After the Revolution of 1789 came the coup of 18 Brumaire in 1799, when Napoleon Bonaparte seized power and eventually crowned himself emperor. Then came the Bourbon Restoration, bringing back the monarchy after Napoleon's defeat. But that didn't last either. The Revolution of 1830, the very same one that gave us our perhaps 20-minute king, replaced the conservative Charles X with the more liberal Louis Philippe, the citizen king. Then came the Revolution of 1848, which established the Second Republic and, for the first time in French history, gave all men the right to vote, regardless of property or wealth. That republic didn't last long either. By 1852, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, nephew of the great Napoleon, had crowned himself Emperor Napoleon III, establishing the Second Empire. The Third Republic came after France's humiliating defeat in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 1871, and lasted until the Nazi occupation of France in 1940. The Fourth Republic emerged after World War II and lasted until 1958, when Charles de Gaulle, facing a crisis over Algeria, established the Fifth Republic, the political system that still governs France today. Count them up: 3 kingdoms, 2 empires, and 5 republics, all in the span of about 200 years. If there's one constant in French political history since 1789, it's been change, often violent change, and the French people's willingness to take to the streets when they believe their government has lost its way. Even today, strikes and protests are so common in France that they're almost a form of national sport. The French don't just accept their government. They argue with it, loudly and frequently. Now let's turn from politics to something much more pleasant: food. And what could be more quintessentially French than the croissant? That buttery, flaky, crescent-shaped pastry that has become synonymous with French breakfast culture? Except here's the thing: the croissant isn't originally French at all. Its origins trace back to Austria. The story goes back to the 17th century in Vienna, where bakers created a pastry called the Kipferl, a crescent-shaped roll. The crescent shape was chosen to commemorate Austria's victory over the Ottoman Empire, whose flag featured a crescent moon. These Kipferls were popular in Vienna for centuries, but they weren't particularly buttery or flaky. They were more like a sweet bread roll. The transformation into the croissant we know today happened in Paris in the mid-19th century. An Austrian artillery officer named August Zang opened a Viennese bakery in Paris in 1839, bringing the Kipferl to France. French bakers, always willing to improve on someone else's recipe, began making their own versions using the laminated dough technique that creates all those flaky layers. They called their creation the croissant because of its crescent shape. Croissant is simply the French word for crescent. The irony is delicious, isn't it? The most iconic French pastry isn't originally French at all. It's an Austrian import, adapted and perfected by French bakers into something that became so associated with France that most people would never guess its true origins. It's a perfect example of how culture works, how traditions migrate and transform and become something new in the process. And while we're on the subject of French breakfast, here's another fact. The French don't actually eat croissants every day. In reality, most French people have much simpler breakfasts. Coffee, perhaps some bread and jam, maybe yogurt. The elaborate French breakfast with croissants and pain au chocolat is more of a weekend treat or something served in hotels for tourists who expect it. But don't let that ruin the fantasy. The croissant remains one of the world's great pastries, whatever its origins might be. Asterisk, if croissants have surprising origins, French cheese is the real deal. France produces over 1,600 distinct types of cheese, grouped into 8 main families: fresh cheeses, soft cheeses with natural rinds, soft cheeses with bloomy rinds, soft cheeses with washed rinds, pressed uncooked cheeses, pressed cooked cheeses, blue-veined cheeses, and goat and sheep cheeses. Some French cheeses are so specific to their regions that they have protected designation of origin status, meaning they can only be legally called by their name if they're produced in a particular area using traditional methods. Think about it. 1,600 different kinds of cheese. You could eat a different French cheese every single day for over 4 years and never repeat yourself. This isn't just variety for its own sake. It's a testament to France's incredible geographic and climatic diversity, and to centuries of regional traditions in cheese making. Each region developed its own techniques based on local milk, cow, goat, or sheep, local climate, local caves for aging, and local tastes. The French relationship with cheese borders on the reverential. Charles de Gaulle once famously asked, in exasperation, "How can you govern a country that has 246 varieties of cheese?" The actual number, as we've seen, is far higher than that. But de Gaulle's point was about the diversity and independence of French culture, the way every region maintains its own traditions and identities. Some French cheeses are pungent to the point of being almost unbearable for the uninitiated. Epoisses, a soft cheese from Burgundy, is so strong-smelling that it's been banned from public transportation in France. And yet the French love it, spreading it on bread and pairing it with wine, savoring its complex, funky flavors. It's a reminder that what seems repulsive to one culture can be a delicacy in another, and that French food culture has always been willing to embrace strong flavors and unusual textures that might make other cultures recoil. And speaking of foods that make other cultures recoil, let's talk about escargot. The French consume approximately 25,000 tons of snails every year, or about 6.5 snails per person annually. These aren't just any snails. They're usually Helix pomatia, the Roman snail, or Helix aspersa, the common garden snail, specially raised for consumption. They're typically prepared à la bourguignon, cooked in garlic butter with parsley, and sometimes shallots, then served still in their shells. The tradition of eating snails goes back to Roman times, but it was in France that it became refined into haute cuisine. Today, you can find escargot on menus at fancy restaurants and at small bistros alike. The French don't consider it strange at all. It's simply part of their culinary heritage. And when prepared properly, with plenty of butter and garlic, even skeptics often find them surprisingly tasty. But here's a peculiar fact that illustrates French bureaucracy at its finest. If you're carrying live snails on a high-speed TGV train, they technically need their own ticket. According to French law, any domesticated animal under 5 kilograms must be a paying passenger. Back in 2008, a Frenchman was actually fined when a ticket inspector caught him carrying snails on board without tickets. The story made headlines, and France's state-owned rail company SNCF eventually waived the fine, probably because they realized how absurd the situation had become. But technically, the regulation still stands. A perfect example of French adherence to rules meeting the sometimes ridiculous results of that. Adherence. No discussion of French food would be complete without talking about wine. France is, after all, one of the world's great wine-producing nations, with regions like Bordeaux, Burgundy, Champagne, the Rhine Valley, and the Loire Valley producing wines that are considered benchmarks for quality worldwide. On average, the French drink about 40 liters of wine per person per year, though this number has been declining in recent decades as health authorities have encouraged moderation. Still, that's a lot of wine, roughly equivalent to 53 standard bottles per person annually. Wine in France isn't just a beverage. It's part of the culture, part of meals, part of social gatherings. It's normal to have wine with lunch and dinner, to discuss the characteristics of different vintages, to have strong opinions about which regions produce the best wines for which purposes. The most expensive bottle of wine ever sold at auction was French, a 1945 Romanée Conti, which sold for $558,000 to an Asian collector at Sotheby's. The bottle had been estimated to sell for around $32,000, but the bidding far exceeded expectations. 1945 was the last vintage of Romanée Conti, made before the vineyard's vines had to be replanted due to phylloxera, making it exceptionally rare dot. And then there's Champagne, that most celebratory of beverages. True champagne can only come from the Champagne region of France, a legally protected designation. Sparkling wine made anywhere else in the world cannot legally be called champagne, a source of endless frustration to wine producers in other regions. The process of making champagne, with its secondary fermentation in the bottle, was perfected by French winemakers over centuries. Legend credits a Benedictine monk named Dom Perignon with its invention in the late 1600s, though in reality, the development of champagne was more gradual and involved many contributors. Still, the legend persists, and the premium champagne brand Dom Perignon bears his name to this day. If cheese and wine are central to French cuisine, so is bread, particularly the iconic French baguette. These long, thin loaves with their crispy crusts and airy interiors are so synonymous with France that seeing someone walking down a Paris street with a baguette tucked under their arm has become a tourist cliché. But it's a cliché rooted in truth. The French really do buy fresh bread daily, and the baguette remains the most popular choice. The baguette is actually regulated by French law. To be called a baguette de tradition francaise, a traditional French baguette, the bread must meet specific requirements. It can only be made with 4 ingredients: wheat flour, water, yeast, and salt. It cannot contain additives or be frozen at any point. It must measure between 55 and 65 centimeters in length and weigh approximately 250 grams. Bakers take these rules seriously, and competitions to determine France's best baguette are held annually, with the winner often earning the prestigious right to supply bread to the Élysée Palace, the official residence of the French president. But beyond laws, there are superstitions surrounding bread. In France, it's considered unlucky to place a baguette upside down on a table. This belief dates back to medieval times and has a dark origin. According to legend, bakers would set aside 1 loaf of bread upside down to mark it for the executioner, who would collect it for free as payment for his grim work. Whether or not this story is historically accurate, the superstition has persisted. Even today, many French people will turn a baguette right side up if they see it lying inverted, just to be safe. If you do accidentally place a baguette upside down, folklore says you should cut a cross into the bottom before eating it to ward off the bad luck. Given how seriously France takes its food, it should come as no surprise that the country has laws about what can and cannot be served in school cafeterias. In 2011, the French government effectively banned unlimited ketchup from school canteens as part of a broader effort to preserve traditional French cuisine and promote healthy eating among children. The law also restricted mayonnaise and vinaigrette dressing. The rule states that ketchup can only be served with foods it was meant to accompany, and even then in limited quantities. In practice, this means ketchup is only available when French fries are being served, which is limited to once a week in school cafeterias. The law was part of a larger regulation designed to ensure that French children grow up appreciating traditional French cuisine and don't develop a habit of drowning everything in condiments. Critics of the law, particularly in other countries, saw it as French food snobbery taken to an absurd extreme. Defenders argued it was a necessary measure to preserve culinary heritage in an age of globalization. The law remains in effect today, though how strictly it's enforced varies from school to school. But the principle is clear. In France, food is serious business, and even children must learn to respect proper cuisine. The irony, of course, is that many traditional French dishes are hardly light or health conscious. French cuisine is famous for its liberal use of butter and cream, for its rich sauces, and its hearty dishes. Cassolette, pot au feu, coq au vin, beef bourguignon. These are not the foods of a culture obsessed with low-fat diets, but they are the foods of a culture that values cooking as an art form, that believes meals should be enjoyed slowly and socially, and that thinks food should taste good rather than merely be nutritious. The war on ketchup is really a war to preserve that philosophy in the face of fast food and convenience culture. Now let's shift away from food and talk about some of France's contributions to science, technology, and human knowledge. Because for all the focus on cheese and wine, the truth is that France has been responsible for an extraordinary number of inventions and innovations that have shaped the modern world. Let's start with something we take completely for granted: photography. The first permanent photograph was created by Frenchman Joseph Nicephore Niepce in 1822. His image, View from the Window at La Grasse, required an exposure time of at least 8 hours, possibly several days. The image is grainy and indistinct, but it was revolutionary. For the first time in human history, an image from reality could be captured and preserved without an artist's hand. Niepce worked with another Frenchman, Louis Daguerre, to refine the process. After Niepce's death, Daguerre developed the daguerreotype, the first commercially practical photographic process, announced to the world in 1839. The impact of photography on human culture cannot be overstated. It changed how we document history, how we remember our loved ones, how we understand distant places. It gave rise to photojournalism, to fashion photography, to art photography. And it all began in France. Moving pictures also owe their existence to France. The Lumière brothers, Auguste and Louis, held the world's first public film screening in Paris on December 28, 1895, at the Salon Indien du Grand Café. They showed 10 short films, including their first film, Workers Leaving the Lumière Factory in Lyon, which depicted exactly what its title suggests: workers leaving a factory at the end of the day. It lasted less than a minute, but it was something humans had never seen before. Reality captured in motion, projected on a screen. From that humble beginning, the entire film industry emerged. The metric system, now used by almost every country in the world except the United States. Myanmar and Liberia was developed in France during the 1790s. Before the metric system, every region had its own units of measurement, making trade and communication impossibly complex. The French Academy of Sciences developed a decimal-based system where all units were related by powers of 10, making calculations much simpler. The meter was originally defined as 1/10,000th of the distance from the North Pole to the equator along a meridian passing through Paris, while that definition has since been refined using more precise measurements. The basic system remains unchanged and is now the international standard for scientific measurement. Louis Pasteur, one of the giants of 19th century science, was French. His work on germ theory revolutionized medicine and our understanding of disease. He developed the process of pasteurization in 1864, showing that heating beverages to a specific temperature for a specific time could kill harmful bacteria without significantly affecting taste. This made it possible to safely store and transport milk, wine, and beer, preventing countless cases of foodborne illness. Pasteur also developed vaccines, including one for rabies, which he successfully used to save the life of a 9-year-old boy named Joseph Meister, who had been bitten by a rabid dog in 1885. Before Pasteur's vaccine, a bite from a rabid animal was essentially a death sentence. The boy's survival proved the vaccine worked, and it has since saved millions of lives worldwide. The stethoscope, that simple but essential medical instrument, was invented by French physician René Laennec in 1816. The story of its invention is charmingly modest. Laennec needed to listen to a patient's heart but felt uncomfortable placing his ear directly on her chest. He rolled up a piece of paper to create a tube, discovered it amplified the sounds, and refined the concept into the first stethoscope. It's hard to imagine modern medicine without this simple device that allows doctors to hear what's happening inside the body. The hot air balloon, the first successful human-carrying flight technology, was demonstrated by the Montgolfier brothers, Joseph Michel and Jacques Etienne, in 1783. Their first public demonstration carried a sheep, a duck, and a rooster as passengers. Later that year, the first untethered manned flight carried 2 humans over Paris. The age of aviation had begun, though it would take another century before powered flight became practical. The modern parachute was invented by French aeronaut Louis-Sébastien Lenormand, who made the first recorded public jump in 1783. He combined the French words para, meaning to protect against, and chute, meaning fall, to name his invention. Blaise Pascal invented the mechanical calculator, the Pascaline, in 1642 when he was just 19 years old. It was the first calculator that could add and subtract, and its basic mechanism influenced calculating machines for centuries. The Braille writing system, which allows blind people to read through touch, was invented by Louis Braille, a French educator who himself was blind. He developed the system in 1824 when he was just 15 years old, adapting a military code used for nighttime communication. His system revolutionized education and communication for blind people worldwide and remains in use today, largely unchanged from his original design. Even the bicycle as we know it today owes something to France. While the basic concept of a two-wheeled vehicle existed earlier, it was French inventors who added crucial improvements. The pedals attached to the front wheel, the chain drive, connecting pedals to the rear wheel, the pneumatic tire. All of these innovations came from French inventors in the 1800s, transforming the bicycle from a curiosity into practical transportation. The list goes on. The aqualung, the self-contained underwater breathing apparatus that made modern scuba diving possible, was co-invented by Frenchman Jacques Cousteau and engineer Émile Gagnon in 1943. The hairdryer, improvements to the sewing machine, advancements in the internal combustion engine, even the word entrepreneur itself, all have French origins. France's contributions to human innovation and progress have been extraordinary, a testament to a culture that values education, scientific inquiry, and creative thinking. Speaking of French culture, let's talk about something the French take very seriously: their language. The French don't just speak French. They protect it, legislate it, and defend it against foreign influences with a passion that can seem almost militant to outsiders. At the center of this linguistic protection stands the Académie Française. Founded way back in 1635 by Cardinal Richelieu under King Louis XIII. The Académie consists of 40 members, known as Les Immortels, the Immortals, who are elected for life. Their job is to act as the official asterisk. At the center of this linguistic protection stands the Académie Française, founded way back in 1635 by Cardinal Richelieu under King Louis XIII. The Académie consists of 40 members, known as Les Immortels, the Immortals, who are elected for life. Their job is to act as the official guardians of the French language, to maintain its purity, clarity, and elegance. They produce and periodically revise the official dictionary of the French language, though the current edition has been a work in progress since 1986, which tells you something about the thoroughness with which they approach their task. Academy's influence on French culture is pervasive. They issue recommendations on proper usage. They create French equivalents for foreign words that have crept into the language, and they generally act as linguistic gatekeepers. Instead of hashtag, they recommend mot dis. Instead of email, they prefer courriel. Fast food chains in France are encouraged to say menu et importer instead of takeaway menu. Not all of their recommendations catch on. French people still say weekend rather than the Academy's preferred fin de semaine, but the institution wields considerable influence over how French is used in official contexts, but the Académie is just the tip of the iceberg. In 1994, France passed the Toubon Law, named after Culture Minister Jacques Toubon, which mandates the use of French in government publications, advertisements, workplaces, commercial contracts, and government-financed schools. The law requires that any document containing obligations for employees or provisions necessary for their work must be written in French. Computer software developed outside France must have its user interface and instruction manuals translated into French to be legally used in French companies. Product packaging must be in French, though translations can also be provided. The law even extends to broadcasting. At least 40% of songs played on French radio must be French-language songs, with at least half of those being new French music. This quota was designed to protect French-language music from being overwhelmed by English-language popular music. Television broadcasts must also adhere to similar quotas for French-language content. The law was created explicitly in response to the increasing use of English in French media and commerce. And while it has been controversial, the European Commission saw it as potentially restricting free competition. It remains in force. In 2006, the French subsidiary of General Electric Medical Systems was fined €500,000, plus an ongoing fine of €20,000 per day, for not complying with the Tobin Law. In the mid-1990s, two French lobbying groups filed a complaint against Georgia Tech Lorraine, the Metz campus of the Georgia Institute of Technology, because all classes were conducted in English and all course descriptions on the French website were in English only. The case was eventually dismissed on a technicality, but the school nevertheless offered its French website in French as well as English. This fierce protection of language isn't just about words. It's about identity. The French see their language as central to what makes them French, a view enshrined in the French Constitution, which states that the language of the Republic is French. When a bill was introduced to allow some university courses to be taught in English to attract more foreign students, the Académie Française called it linguistic treason and warned that French risked becoming a dead language. The reaction might seem extreme to outsiders, but to the French, language is not just a tool for communication. It's a living embodiment of culture, history, and national identity, something worth protecting at almost any cost. All of this history, culture, food, and linguistic pride adds up to make France the most visited country in the world. This isn't a recent development. France has held this title for more than 30 years. In 2019, before the pandemic, France welcomed approximately 90 million international tourists. Even during the pandemic year of 2020, when global tourism collapsed, France still received millions of visitors, and numbers have since rebounded strongly. What draws all these people? Well, practically everything. Paris alone, often called the City of Light, attracts tens of millions of visitors annually. The Eiffel Tower, that iconic iron lattice structure built for the 1889 World's Fair, receives over 6 million visitors each year, making it the most visited paid monument in the world. When it was built, many Parisians hated it, calling it an eyesore, a metal monstrosity that ruined the classical beauty of the city. It was only supposed to stand for 20 years, but it proved so useful as a radio transmission tower that it was allowed to remain. And over time, it became the very symbol of Paris, of France, and in many ways, of European elegance itself. The Louvre Museum, housed in a former royal palace along the Seine, is the world's most visited art museum, attracting millions of people annually. It's home to approximately 38,000 objects displayed across 72,800 square meters, including the Mona Lisa, Leonardo da Vinci's enigmatic portrait that draws crowds so thick that most visitors only glimpse it from several meters away. Over the heads of other tourists, protected behind bulletproof glass, the Palace of Versailles. That stunning monument to royal excess built by Louis XIV welcomes millions of visitors each year. People come to walk through the Hall of Mirrors, where the Treaty of Versailles was signed, ending World War I, to marvel at the opulent royal apartments, and to wander through the vast formal gardens designed by André Lentré. Versailles isn't just a palace. It's a three-dimensional manifestation of absolute monarchy, a place where every detail, from the painted ceilings to the precisely trimmed hedges, was designed to glorify the king. But France isn't just Paris and Versailles. The country has over 40 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, one of the highest numbers in the world. Mont Saint-Michel, that medieval abbey perched on a rocky tidal island in Normandy, attracts millions of visitors annually. The cathedral's silhouette, rising from the sea with the tide flowing around it, is one of the most photographed sites in France. The Loire Valley, with its stunning chateaux scattered along the river, like jewels on a necklace, has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its cultural landscape. The French Riviera, or Côte d'Azur, that sun-drenched Mediterranean coastline, attracts millions of tourists annually to cities like Nice, Cannes, and Saint-Tropez. The region benefits from 300 days of sunshine per year, 115 kilometers of coastline and beaches, 18 golf courses, and thousands of restaurants. The Alpine regions, including the Pyrenees, host millions of visitors annually, many coming for winter sports in world-famous resorts like Chamonix and Courchevel. And then there's Disneyland Paris, which receives millions of visitors annually, making it one of the most visited theme parks in Europe. It's an ironic fact that one of the most visited attractions in France, a country famous for its high culture and artistic heritage, is an American-style theme park featuring a castle based on German fairy tales. But the French have embraced it, and it has become an integral part of the country's tourism economy. Tourism contributes significantly to France's GDP, representing a substantial portion of the country's total economic output. It supports millions of jobs. The industry has recovered strongly from the pandemic, with visitor numbers now approaching or exceeding pre-pandemic levels. France's tourism success is built on its incredible diversity. You can ski in the Alps in the morning and swim in the Mediterranean in the afternoon. You can visit Roman ruins, medieval castles, and cutting-edge contemporary architecture all in the same day. You can eat at Michelin-starred restaurants or grab a simple but perfect jambon beurre sandwich from a corner bakery. Now let's venture into some of the stranger aspects of French law and regulation. Because France has accumulated, over its long history, a remarkable collection of laws that range from the sensible to the utterly bizarre. Let's start with baby names. In France, you don't have complete freedom to name your child whatever you want. Until 2013, parents had to choose names from an approved list maintained by the government, which included names of saints and figures from classical history. If you wanted to name your child something not on the list, you needed special permission from a local judge. The law was liberalized in 2013, allowing more freedom, but registrars can still refer unusual names to the local prosecutor if they believe the name is contrary to the interests of the child. Names that have been rejected by French courts include Nutella, Strawberry, Prince William, and Mini Cooper. The reasoning is always the same. The name would expose the child to ridicule. Then there's a curious claim about naming pigs Napoleon. While this story is often repeated, the actual existence of such a law in the French Penal Code is questionable. No verified contemporary source confirms Article 291 prohibits naming pigs Napoleon. This appears to be more urban legend than legal reality, though it's a legend that has persisted for decades, perhaps reflecting France's complicated relationship with Napoleon's legacy and the desire to protect national dignity. In the town of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, famous for its wine, there's a municipal decree from 1954 that bans the landing of flying saucers and other unidentified flying objects within the town limits. The mayor at the time, apparently concerned about potential extraterrestrial visitors disrupting the peaceful winemaking activities of his town, issued the decree stating that any aircraft known as flying saucer or flying cigar, which should land on the territory of the community, will be immediately held in custody. The penalty for violation? Impoundment of the spacecraft. One wonders where they plan to store these confiscated UFOs, but the decree, absurd as it sounds, is documented and was apparently never officially repealed. There's also a law, dating from 1910, that prohibited kissing on railway platforms. The law was enacted because lingering farewells were causing train delays. According to the regulation, couples saying goodbye should do so before reaching the platform. Of course, this law is never enforced today, but it exists in that vast archive of obsolete legislation that no one has bothered to officially repeal. France also has strict regulations about when stores can hold sales. The French government regulates 2 annual sale periods: winter sales, which typically begin in January and last 6 weeks, and summer sales, beginning in June or July and also lasting 6 weeks. Outside of these periods, stores are prohibited from calling their price reductions sales or solds. The idea is to prevent unfair competition and to protect consumers from manipulative pricing tactics. Stores found in violation can face substantial fines. It's a level of government involvement in retail that would be unthinkable in many other countries, but in France, it's accepted as part of the social contract. We already mentioned the restrictions on ketchup in schools, but the food regulations go even deeper. French law dictates that a traditional baguette can only be made from 4 ingredients: wheat flour, water, yeast, and salt. It cannot be frozen at any point. It must be a certain length and weight. These aren't suggestions. They're legal requirements, and bakeries can face penalties for calling something a baguette de tradition francaise if it doesn't meet the standards. France also has laws about music quotas. As we mentioned, at least 40% of songs on French radio must be in French. But it goes beyond that. The law specifies that of this 40%, at least half should be new French-language songs, meaning songs released within recent months. This is designed not just to protect the French language, but to support the French music industry and ensure that new French artists get airplay. Radio stations that don't comply face hefty fines. There's also a law about work emails. In 2017, France enacted a right to disconnect, law that gives employees at companies with more than 50 workers the right to ignore work emails outside of working hours. The law recognizes that the blurring of boundaries between work and personal life, facilitated by smartphones and constant connectivity, can be detrimental to workers' health and family life. Companies must negotiate specific policies with employees about the use of work emails and other digital communication outside of office hours. It's an attempt to legislate work-life balance, and while it has been controversial and difficult to enforce, it represents a very French approach to protecting workers from the demands of modern capitalism. Beyond laws, France has a rich tradition of social customs and traditions that can seem delightfully strange to outsiders. Let's explore some of these peculiarities that make French culture so distinctive. Start with the greeting. The French don't just say hello. They have an elaborate system of greetings that varies depending on the relationship, the region, and the social context. Among friends and family, the greeting is la bise, kisses on both cheeks. But how many kisses? That depends on where you are in France. In Paris, it's typically 2 kisses, 1 on each cheek. In Provence, it's 3. In some parts of the north and west, it's 4. In certain regions, people might even exchange 5 kisses. There are actual maps showing the regional variations in greeting customs. A testament to France's incredible regional diversity, despite centuries of centralization. But here's the crucial detail. These aren't real kisses. You don't actually kiss the person's cheek. You touch cheeks and kiss the air. Getting this wrong can be awkward. And the custom has rules. Women kiss both men and women, but men only kiss women and very close male friends or family members. In professional contexts, men typically shake hands with other men. It's a complex social code that the French navigate unconsciously, but that can trip up newcomers. In speaking of greetings, you absolutely must, say bonjour when entering any shop, restaurant, or business, and au revoir when leaving. This isn't optional. It's a fundamental rule of French politeness. Walking into a bakery and just ordering your bread without first greeting the person behind the counter is considered shockingly rude. The shopkeeper will likely treat you coldly, and other customers might give you disapproving looks. It seems like a small thing, but to the French, these ritualized greetings are essential markers of civility and respect. The French also have fascinating traditions around meals. Breakfast, contrary to tourist expectations, is usually simple: coffee and perhaps some bread and jam. The elaborate breakfast with croissants is more of a weekend treat. But lunch and dinner are sacred. The French typically eat lunch between noon and 2 p.m., and dinner between 7 and 9 p.m. later in the South. Meals are social occasions meant to be savored, not rushed. The idea of eating lunch at your desk while working, common in many countries, is alien to French culture. Even in busy offices, people take proper lunch breaks, often lasting an hour or more. And here's something that surprises many visitors. The French serve cheese after the main course, but before dessert. In most cultures, cheese, if served at all, comes before the meal as an appetizer. But in France, there's a separate cheese course, coming after you've eaten your entree, but before the sweet conclusion. The reasoning is that cheese prepares the palate for dessert and helps digest the meal. At a formal French dinner, you might be presented with a cheese plate offering 4 or 5 different cheeses, from which you're expected to take a small portion of each. It's another example of how seriously the French take the structure and ritual of dining. Speaking of dining, the French have a custom called faire le pont, which literally means to make the bridge. This refers to taking an extra day off work to create a long weekend when a public holiday falls on a Tuesday or Thursday. If the holiday is on Thursday, many people will take Friday off as well, creating a 4-day weekend. This practice is so common and accepted that employers largely plan for it. It reflects the French attitude toward work-life balance. Work is important, but so is leisure. And a sensible person doesn't miss an opportunity to extend their time off when the calendar cooperates. The French also have interesting traditions around weddings. French law requires all couples to have a civil ceremony at the town hall, performed by the mayor or a deputy, before they can have any religious ceremony. This legal wedding is what counts. Any church wedding is purely ceremonial and has no legal standing. This separation of civil and religious marriage dates back to the Revolution and reflects France's strict secularism. Known as le cite, after the wedding ceremony, there's a charming custom. As the wedding party drives from the ceremony to the reception, everyone honks their car horns continuously. And not just the wedding party. Strangers on the street who see the procession often join in, creating a cacophony of celebratory noise that follows the newlyweds through town. It's loud, it's joyful, and it announces to the whole community that a marriage has just taken place. But the French also have a darker tradition surrounding weddings. Bachelor and bachelorette parties are called enterrement, devai de jeune fille, or enterrement devai de Garcon, which translates as the burial of the life of the young woman or young man. It's not uncommon to see the bride-to-be or groom-to-be carrying a mock tombstone as part of their pre-wedding celebration. This morbid humor reflects a French tendency to acknowledge the serious, even melancholy aspects of life transitions. Getting married means the end of your single life, so why not hold a funeral for it? Then there's Poisson d'Avril, April Fish Day, the French version of April Fool's Day. The tradition dates back centuries, and it involves pranking people by sticking paper fish on their backs without them noticing, then running away while yelling, Poisson d'Avril. Children love this tradition, and adults participate too. Newspapers sometimes print fake stories with fish references woven into them. The origin of the tradition is debated, but one theory connects it to the calendar reform in 1564, which moved the start of the year from April 1st to January 1st, making anyone who still celebrated the new year in April an April Fool. The French also celebrate St. Catherine's Day on November 25th. Saint Catherine is the patron saint of unmarried women, and tradition holds that unmarried women over 25, called Catherinettes, should receive elaborate hats on this day, colored yellow for faith and green for wisdom, which they're expected to wear all day. The custom has faded somewhat in modern times, but it's still observed in some places, especially in the fashion industry. It's a fascinating relic of a time when women's unmarried status after a certain age was seen as unusual enough to warrant special recognition. During January, French bakeries fill with galette de Rio, or king's cake, a flaky pastry filled with frangipane and containing a hidden charm called la fève, originally a dried bean, but now usually a small porcelain or plastic figurine. The tradition dates back to Roman times and marks the Epiphany. Families gather, and the youngest child crawls under the table and calls out names as each slice is served, ensuring that the distribution is random. Whoever finds the fave in their slice becomes king or queen for the day and wears a paper crown. It's a delightful tradition that brings families together and adds an element of surprise and fun to the cold. The French have a unique relationship with time that can bewilder visitors from cultures where punctuality is paramount. In France, especially in social situations, showing up exactly on time is considered somewhat gauche. If you're invited to dinner at 7 p.m., arriving at 7 is actually considered rude. You'd be catching your hosts in the midst of their final preparations. The polite thing is to arrive 15 to 30 minutes late, giving your hosts time to finish getting ready and creating an atmosphere of casual elegance rather than rushed efficiency. This French time extends to business meetings too, though to a lesser extent. A few minutes late is generally acceptable and not remarked upon. The French value flexibility over rigid adherence to schedule, seeing the latter as somewhat mechanical and lacking in human warmth. This can be frustrating for visitors from cultures where being on time is a sign of respect. But it reflects a fundamentally different philosophy. Relationships matter more than schedules, and a few extra minutes spent in conversation is never wasted. The French also have an interesting approach to work hours. The standard work week in France is 35 hours, established by law in 2000. This is one of the shortest standard work weeks in the developed world. The law was controversial when enacted and remains so, with some arguing it makes France less competitive internationally, while others defend it as essential for quality of life. In practice, many French workers, especially managers and professionals, work more than 35 hours, but they're compensated with additional vacation time or other benefits. And speaking of vacation, the French get at least 5 weeks of paid vacation per year, one of the most generous vacation allowances in the world. Most French workers take at least 2 weeks in August, when much of the country essentially shuts down. Shops close, offices operate with skeleton crews, and major cities like Paris empty out as residents flee to the coast or countryside. This annual migration is so predictable that there are specific terms for it. Les Juilletistes are those who vacation in July, and Les Aotians are those who go in August. The traffic jams on highways leading out of Paris on the last weekend of July and first weekend of August are legendary, with cars backed up for kilometers as the entire nation heads off on holiday at the same time. While we've spent a lot of time in France's past, the country has plenty of modern peculiarities that make it fascinating today. Despite being home to major tech companies and having a highly educated population, France has been slower than some other developed nations to adopt certain technologies. Many French people still prefer cash to credit cards, and checks are still widely used, even as they've become nearly obsolete in many other countries. The French education system is highly centralized and rigorous. Students attend school from about 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., making for long days, but they also get generous vacation time, with 2-week breaks every 6 to 8 weeks throughout the year. The system is designed to be meritocratic, with significant emphasis placed on national exams, particularly the baccalaureate, or BAC, the exam taken at the end of secondary school that determines university placement. The BAC results are published in newspapers, and passing it is seen as a major life milestone. Students who fail can retake it, but the pressure is immense. And the period around the BAC exams in June is one of high stress for French teenagers and their families. French healthcare is often ranked among the best in the world. The system is based on universal coverage with a mix of public and private provision. French people visit the doctor frequently. On average, they see a physician about 6 to 7 times per year, more than in most other developed countries. Prescription medications are heavily subsidized, and the cost of care is generally much lower than in countries like the United States. The French can be almost obsessed with their health, and pharmacies, which sell only medications and health-related products, not general merchandise, are everywhere. You can recognize them by the green cross sign that illuminates at night. The French also have a unique relationship with beauty and personal care. French pharmacies sell an incredible array of skincare products, and French women, and increasingly men, have elaborate skincare routines involving multiple products. The French approach to beauty emphasizes looking natural and effortless, even though achieving that look often requires significant effort. The concept of je ne sais quoi, that indefinable quality of style and attractiveness, is deeply embedded in French culture. French women are famous for appearing perfectly put together without seeming to try too hard, an art that's actually quite deliberate. France also has interesting quirks in its retail culture. Unlike in many countries where sales and discounts are constant, French stores can only officially hold sales during 2 designated periods per year, as we mentioned earlier. During these official sale periods, store windows are plastered with sold signs, and shoppers descend in droves to take advantage of the discounts. Outside of these periods, discounts exist but must be presented differently, often as promotions or offers rather than sales. Another retail peculiarity: in France, you bag your own groceries. There are no baggers at supermarket checkouts, and cashiers will not bag your items for you. You're expected to bring your own reusable bags and pack your own purchases. If you forget your bags, you can buy reusable ones at the checkout, but plastic bags are increasingly rare. This self-service approach extends to many aspects of French retail. The culture generally expects more self-reliance from customers than in countries where customer service includes more hands-on assistance. French are also famous for their strikes and protests. Labor unions remain powerful in France, particularly in public sectors like transportation and education, and strikes are a regular occurrence. When Paris metro workers go on strike, it can paralyze the city. When train workers strike, it affects the entire country. But strikes are so common that the French have developed a stoic acceptance of them. There's even a word, grève, that everyone knows and uses regularly. The right to strike is seen as fundamental, a way for workers to exert power and make their voices heard. What might seem like chaos and dysfunction to outsiders is, to the French, democracy in action. Despite its industrial history, France has become increasingly environmentally conscious. The country generates about 70% of its electricity from nuclear power, making it one of the least carbon-intensive electricity systems in the developed world. This heavy reliance on nuclear power has been controversial, particularly after the Fukushima disaster, but it has allowed France to significantly reduce its greenhouse gas emissions compared to countries that rely more heavily on fossil fuels. France was also one of the first countries to ban single-use plastic bags in supermarkets, a move that took effect in 2016. The ban has been largely successful, with reusable bags now the norm. France has also banned plastic plates, cups, and cutlery, with the restrictions taking full effect in 2020. These measures reflect a growing environmental awareness among the French public and a willingness to accept government regulation in service of environmental goals. French cities maintain extensive parks and green spaces. Paris alone has over 400 parks and gardens, ranging from vast spaces like the Bois de Boulogne and Bois de Vincennes on the city's edges to small neighborhood squares. The French have a tradition of public gardens going back centuries, seeing them as essential for public health and quality of life. Many of these parks have strict rules. Stay off the grass. Don't pick the flowers that can seem overly restrictive to visitors. But the French see these rules as necessary to preserve the beauty and order of shared spaces. France also has strong laws protecting agricultural land from development. You can't just buy French farmland and build houses on it. The land's agricultural designation must be maintained unless there's a compelling public interest in changing it. This has helped preserve France's countryside and its agricultural character, even as the country has modernized and urbanized. Driving through rural France, you still see landscapes of vineyards, wheat fields, and sunflower fields that look much as they did generations ago, a continuity that's increasingly rare in developed countries. Here's a fact that surprises many people. France gave the United States the Statue of Liberty. The colossal neoclassical sculpture standing in New York Harbor was a gift from France. Designed by French sculptor Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi, and with its internal structure designed by Gustave Eiffel, the same engineer who later built the Eiffel Tower. The statue was dedicated in 1886 and has since become one of the most recognizable symbols of America and of freedom itself. But what many people don't know is that there are multiple Statue of Liberty replicas in France. Paris alone has several. There's a quarter-scale replica on the Isle aux Cygnes in the Seine River, erected in 1889, facing west toward her larger sister across the Atlantic. There's another in the Luxembourg Gardens, and a third in the Musée d'Orsay. Other French cities, including Bordeaux, Lyon, and Colmar, Bartholdi's birthplace, also have their own Liberty statues. So while America has the most famous Statue of Liberty, France has more of them. A reminder that this symbol of American freedom has deeply French roots. The Statue of Liberty's official name is Liberty Enlightening the World, and she represents Libertas, the Roman goddess of freedom. She holds a torch above her head with her right hand and carries a tabula ansata, inscribed with the date of the American Declaration of Independence in her left. At her feet lie broken chains, symbolizing the end of tyranny and slavery. The statue was funded by French donations, while Americans paid for the pedestal. It was shipped to America in 350 individual pieces, packed in over 200 crates, and then assembled on site. The statue has become so iconic that it's easy to forget it was once controversial. Many Americans initially questioned whether they wanted a gigantic French statue dominating New York Harbor. We've talked about France's protection of its language, but we should also discuss why the French have such pride in their linguistic heritage. French was, for centuries, the international language of diplomacy, culture, and educated discourse. From the 17th through the early 20th century, if you wanted to be considered educated and sophisticated anywhere in Europe, you spoke French. It was the language of royal courts from Russia to Sweden, the language in which treaties were negotiated and intellectual ideas exchanged. This status as the international language of culture gave French enormous prestige, and losing that status has been difficult for France to accept. English has largely replaced French as the global lingua franca, a shift that accelerated after World War II with America's rise to global dominance. The French efforts to protect their language through the Académie Française and laws like the Tobin Law are, in part, a response to this loss of linguistic prestige, an attempt to preserve French's importance in a world increasingly dominated by English. French remains an important global language. It's spoken by approximately 300 million people worldwide across 5 continents. It's an official language of the United Nations, the European Union, NATO, the International Olympic Committee, and numerous other international organizations. In Africa, French is an official language in 29 countries and is growing in influence. Projections suggest that by 2050, there could be over 700 million French speakers worldwide. Largely due to population growth in French-speaking Africa. France has also produced an extraordinary number of literary giants. From medieval epics like The Song of Roland to the philosophical novels of the Enlightenment, from the romantic poetry of Victor Hugo to the existentialist works of Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, French literature has shaped Western thought. France has produced 15 Nobel Prize winners in literature, more than any country except the United States. Names like Voltaire, Molière, Baudelaire, Balzac, Flaubert, Proust, Dumas, and countless others form a constellation of literary genius. The French take their literature seriously in ways that can seem unusual to outsiders. Philosophy is taught in high school and is a required subject for the baccalaureate exam. Students are expected to read and analyze difficult philosophical texts and to write coherent essays about abstract concepts. Philosophers like Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, and Simone de Beauvoir aren't just academic figures. They're cultural icons whose ideas penetrate popular discourse. France is one of the few countries where intellectuals can achieve genuine celebrity status. France, particularly Paris, has long been considered the world capital of fashion. The term haute couture is French, and Paris Fashion Week is one of the most important events in the global fashion calendar. French fashion houses like Chanel, Dior, Louis Vuitton, Yves Saint Laurent, and Hermès are among the most prestigious and valuable brands in the world. But here's an interesting detail. The word denim comes from Denim seams, meaning from NGMs, referring to the French city where a similar sturdy cloth was made. Levi Strauss used French fabric to make his first jeans in the 1850s, though the garment itself was developed in America. So even blue jeans, that most American of garments, have French origins. French fashion has always been about more than just clothing. It's about an entire approach to life and self-presentation. The concept of li chic is hard to define but easy to recognize. It's about looking effortlessly stylish, about quality over quantity, about classic pieces rather than fleeting trends. French women are famous for their capsule wardrobes, consisting of a small number of high-quality, versatile pieces that can be mixed and matched, rather than closets overflowing with clothes they rarely wear. Interestingly, while Paris is known for high fashion, the French in general tend to dress more conservatively than fashion media might suggest. Black is ubiquitous. Bright colors are less common than in many other countries. The emphasis is on looking pulled together rather than standing out. Athletic wear is for the gym, not for errands or casual outings. The casual, comfortable approach to dress common in countries like the United States can seem sloppy to French sensibilities. We should address a common misconception. The French military has an undeserved reputation for weakness, particularly in American popular culture. The French military defeat jokes are common, but they reflect historical ignorance more than reality. France has one of the most successful military records in European history, with more military victories than any other European nation. From the time of Charlemagne through Napoleon, French military power dominated Europe for centuries. Yes, France suffered a catastrophic defeat to Nazi Germany in 1940, collapsing in just 6 weeks. But this single defeat, however devastating, doesn't define French military history. France fought alongside the Allies in both world wars, suffering enormous casualties. Over 1,300,000 French soldiers died in World War I alone, with many more wounded. The trenches of Verdun and the Somme are soaked with French blood. French resistance fighters played crucial roles in undermining Nazi occupation. French forces participated in the D-Day landings and the liberation of their own country. France remains a major military power today, with nuclear weapons, an aircraft carrier, modern fighter jets, and well-trained professional forces. French military intervention has been significant in former French colonies in Africa, and French special forces are considered among the world's best. France spends billions on its military annually and maintains bases around the world. The French Foreign Legion, with its demanding training and mystique, attracts recruits from dozens of countries. So there you have it, 100 weird, wonderful, fascinating facts about France, a country that has given the world so much art, literature, philosophy, cuisine, wine, political thought, scientific innovation, and yet remains in many ways deeply mysterious and sometimes baffling even to those who think they understand it. France is a country of contradictions, fiercely proud of its language, yet pragmatic when necessary, committed to secularism, yet filled with magnificent churches, believing in equality, yet maintaining distinct social hierarchies, valuing individual freedom, yet accepting extensive government regulation, revolutionary in spirit, yet deeply traditional in practice. What makes France endlessly fascinating is precisely these contradictions. The way ancient and modern coexist, the way tradition and innovation mix, the way the absurd and sublime sit side by side. A country where the legend says you can't name your pig Napoleon, but you can actually marry someone who's dead. Where schools ban ketchup, but serve cheese courses. Where snails technically need train tickets, and UFOs can be impounded. Where the language is protected by law and committees of immortals. Where people kiss hello and goodbye, but consider smiling at strangers odd. Where wine flows freely, but work weeks are short. Where history isn't just studied, but lived daily. Present in every cobblestone and chateau, every village church and city square. France has shaped the modern world in countless ways. From the Enlightenment's ideas about human rights to the practical inventions that make daily life easier, it continues to punch above its weight in culture, cuisine, fashion, and diplomacy. And it does it all with a distinctive style and self-assurance that can seem arrogant to outsiders, but is really just a deep conviction that France has something valuable to offer the world. Something worth preserving and protecting. From kings who may or may not have reigned for 20 minutes to a nation that spans 12 time zones. From the Austrian origins of the croissant to 1,600 varieties of cheese. From the guillotine's surprisingly recent use to posthumous marriages that honor love beyond death. From photography and cinema to the metric system and pasteurization. From the Académie Française guarding language to tourists flooding in by the millions each year. France remains a place of endless discovery and perpetual surprise. We've journeyed through its peculiar laws and charming customs, through its revolutionary history and its steadfast traditions, through its contributions to science and its devotion to art, through its complex relationship with time and its passionate defense of identity. We've seen how France can be simultaneously the most visited country on Earth and the one that finds companies for not using French. How it can produce the most romantic gesture of posthumous marriage and the most practical invention of the metric system. How it can treasure both ancient chateaux and Disneyland Paris. This is France. Contradictory, complex, infuriating, inspiring, a nation that refuses to be simple or easily categorized. That maintains its distinctiveness in an increasingly homogenized world. That insists on doing things its own way, even when that way seems bizarre to outsiders. It's a country where bureaucracy reaches absurd heights, yet somehow produces extraordinary beauty. Where rules are strict, yet frequently bent. Where tradition is sacred, yet revolution is always lurking around the corner. If you've enjoyed this journey through the peculiarities of France, consider subscribing to Restful Realities for more explorations of the strange and wonderful aspects of our world. Hit that like button if you learned something new tonight, and leave a comment sharing your own experiences with France or any weird facts you know that we didn't cover. From disputed 20-minute kings to the most visited country, from croissants to the guillotine, from the hexagon to 12 time zones, France remains a place where every fact leads to another question, where every answer reveals new mysteries. And with that, let your eyelids grow heavy. Let the stories of France drift through your mind like mist over the Loire Valley, like the aroma of fresh bread from a corner boulangerie, like the evening light on the Seine as it flows past ancient bridges. Whether you're falling asleep now or staying with us a while longer, thank you for joining this journey through the curious, beautiful, bizarre nation of France. The hexagon sleeps. The time zones march on around the world. The immortals guard their language. The cheese ages in its caves. The wine waits in its cellars. The guillotine rests in museums. The Eiffel Tower lights up the night. And somewhere, perhaps, a couple is getting married at a town hall while a photograph stands silent witness, completing a promise that death interrupted but love refused to abandon. Bonne nuit et dormez bien. Good night and sleep well.